Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, someone who Andrew Claudio just gave some very devastating news to about 2 minutes ago. Fred Katz of The Athletic, who was here to talk about the Knicks and the NBA, but I'm sorry that you're a Yankee fan and you just learned that apparently some of your guys may not be taking the field that soon.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, they may or may not have traded for an unvaccinated player in a city with a vaccine mandate. May or may not. We'll find out.
Well, listen, these are the questions that that you like to ask before you trade for folks.
Maybe he said he'd do it. Maybe they're like, yeah, he's unvaccinated, but he'll do it because of the mandate. Like there are definitely players who in the NBA who did it like Andrew Wiggins did it because of the mandate, right?
Yes.
Maybe he'll do it.
See, mandates maybe making the world a better place. Who knows? We'll find out. Tune in next time on Fred Talks Baseball. But anyway, how you been, man?
I'm great. I'm lovely. I'm just traveling the country, watching Knicks games. I did the math last night. I think I was on the road for 26 out of 40 days.
Oof.
I got stuck in Tennessee because of that cyclone the other day. Had to leave Memphis, drive to Nashville just to get a flight out the next day.
Oof.
It was the life of a beat writer.
I have to ask this. Did you attend the Nets? Wait, no. So that was the...
No, I did not go to the Nets.
You didn't go to the Nets game because you were grounded.
I was in Nashville and I watched it on TV.
That's right. I remember the tweet that you sent out. If you had been able to get home, would you have gone to the Nets game to cover it in person?
Of course.
Okay. I was just asking. That's all. You're a trooper. That's all. I'm going to leave it at that. You're a trooper. The Knicks, I don't know if we could call them troopers, but I'm thinking back to maybe not the last pod we did, but maybe the one before that. I don't know. It's all run together at this point, where the season had kind of gone poorly and we were looking at this very road heavy slate over the second half of the year with a lot of tough games. And it was like, okay, are they going to come up big or are they going to not? And I think we know the answer to that question now. Before we get into some specifics, I'll just ask, I think I asked this the last time. I'll ask it again. Since the last time we talked, are you kind of surprised at how the season has been going, or is this kind of what you expected?
Nah, I think this is what I expected. I mean, I was talking to somebody. I won't say this is what I expected at the very beginning of the year. I figured they'd probably be around 500. I thought their over under was pretty appropriate. I think it was 41 coming into the year. I think I had them at 43 or something like that, 44 wins. So obviously I did not expect they can't even hit that number now. They've already got 40 losses. So I didn't expect to this degree, but once we kind of saw what they were, even when they were 22 and 21, you just looked at the upcoming schedule and you saw the way that they were playing. And it was like, ooh, they are not the quality of 22 and 21. And I kind of thought 50 losses at that point was even more likely than 500, even though they were hovering around 500 at the moment. They're not going to lose 50.
I was about to say it's not off the table, but I would personally be surprised. It's
probably off the table. We've talked for so long about how difficult the remaining strength of schedule is.
Yeah. And you pointed it out today in your article. Yeah.
Yeah. It's over. It's over. The difficult part is over. They got 14 games left. 9 of them are home. They got one of the 10 easiest schedules in the league in terms of just remaining winning percentage of the teams they're playing. It's a lot of easy games. I think that might just set it up for Knicks fans to be really pissed in the end because they play themselves into the 10th pick instead of the 7th or 10th lottery position.
You know who I blame? I blame you, Fred Katz, for writing. I misspoke. It was not in today's article. We're going to talk about in a minute because today is coming on Wednesday, which is when this episode is going to drop. But no, your Monday piece in which you gently reminded Knicks fans of their current situation in terms of the tanking standings. And I love how you pointed out because I had the same thought for a few days now. The Portland game, big game. Not for the reasons maybe huge game.
Sacramento game. Huge
Sacramento game was, yeah, very big.
Yeah. Upcoming Portland game, huge game. Knicks blowing that 23-point lead to Portland might be massive at the end of the year in terms of lottery positioning. As Portland just continues to, although they beat the Wizards the other night, but they just had a 6-game stretch where they lost games by 190 combined points.
Yeah, their post All-Star break net rating was minus I think like minus 30 before the Wizards game. And then of course they beat your old friends, the Washington Wizards. Leave it to the Wiz, man, to lose to that team.
Yeah. They just beat the teams that I covered, the Wizards, the Knicks.
There you go.
They only beat the teams that I cover. But yeah, I mean, they'll be somewhere in like that 8 to 10 range in all likelihood, but watch, like they've got an easy remaining strength of schedule. It would be extremely in character for this team to fake comeback this season.
I mean, they have the two. I mean, look, this is not what we're going to talk about today, but like they have 2 games left against Charlotte. And like, if you look at Charlotte's schedule, it's not like there's a whole lot of like, oh, well, that's definitely a win or that's definitely a win. Like, as you just said, it would be so Knicks if they took this thing down to like the last week, Right. Yeah. I mean, 5 back of the plan? 5 and a half, something like that. Yeah.
It's really hard to come back from with 14 games. Like that's like almost bordering on 2008 Mets stuff, 2007 Mets stuff.
That was the one where Glavine started.
Was seven games in 17 to the Phillies.
Glavine started the last game of the
season. I'm only saying that to annoy Andrew, who's sitting there
as you should
right now.
As you should.
Listen, as somebody who's in the same boat with fears of who may not be playing home games for the Mets this year, I empathize with you. This is the 07 Mets. Get your Mets collapses correct. Mets. Yeah. 7-game lead with 17 to play. Tom Glavine throws one out in the last game of the season and they blow the division.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it would take something like that for the Knicks to make play in. As you said, it's probably going to be about lottery odds. We'll talk about some of the bad stuff in a bit. Let's start with the good because a little birdie told me that you may have something coming out on RJ Barrett, who is there an argument that he is the brightest spot about this Knicks season? And I'm like, forget about actually, no, there is no argument. Like what's second? Like what's the second brightest part about this Knicks season? I
think they've done a pretty good job drafting.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
okay.
Especially late in the draft.
Sims. Yeah. Yeah.
Grimes, like Sims looks like an NBA player.
He is.
Grimes looks like a good NBA player. I mean, you get a good NBA player with the 25th pick. Like Grimes is a bright spot for sure.
I still have hopes for quickly.
Sims is like a flickering spot. Like but considering the context of 58th pick, you're like, okay, this guy, 50th pick, 2-way contract, looks like he actually will have a career. That's if anyone has a career after getting drafted at number 58, it's an excellent pick. I think in general, the young guys have been pretty encouraging on the whole.
But there is only one young guy who, when you, again, is it kind of cherry pick stats? Yes. But if you put in, like we all do, you put in his points, his rebounds, his assists into the old NBA stats, database and sort them from New Year's Eve, which I know is a date that you've kind of have circled in your most recent writing. It puts him in some elite company, and, there are obvious differences. The efficiency is better, but not still where you'd want it to be. So yeah, give me your thoughts on Mr. Barrett. What do you is there a change that you've noticed, or like where do you take this?
Yeah, so I have a story that'll come out at some point on Wednesday. Might not be out by the time this podcast is out, but it'll come out at some point on Wednesday on The Athletic. Kind of about how December 31st was really his turning point. And I don't know if it was because of a New Year's resolution or what, but I spoke to his trainer, Drew Hanlon, and Drew was telling me, I've been using December 31st as that random marker before I even heard this anecdote, because they played the Thunder that night and he took 11 shots in the paint. And I remember watching that game. They were missing half the team because of a COVID breakout. And I remember watching that game. And even after that game, I asked Tibbs, was that more pick and roll than RJ Barrett has ever run in his entire career? And Tibbs
I remember that.
And it just stood out to me to such a degree. He was going at the paint the whole time. He was running pick and roll. And I was like, I get that everybody's out, but this is still a sort of assertiveness towards driving that just hasn't really existed with him, at least in the time that, at least this season. And even last season when he got hot, it was mostly getting hot with the jumper more so than anything else in terms of changing his actual style and his habits. And this just looked like a different guy. And that's perpetuated since that night. I mean, he is taking, since December 31st, he's taking 12 shots in the paint a game. Before that, he was taking 7. That's just a giant leap. He's taking more than 7 free throw attempts a game. He was taking under 3.5 before then. I mean, he's more than doubled his free throw attempts a game. All that stuff in terms of his tendencies, just reliance around the paint and the rim is way up. So that afternoon on December 31st, he actually texted Drew Hanlon a text saying like, it's time for me to take over. It's time to make a change. And it's almost as if it was like a New Year's resolution that he sent 11 hours before the new year turned over. And he's really done it. I mean, he really followed through on the text message that he sent to Drew Hanlon. That's kind of what the story is about, just about how he has really just changed his habits in what is clearly an extremely conscious and not fluky way.
I can't wait to read the story, especially since I'm someone that when it came out, I think it was before this season or before last season, whenever it was, that like the kind of Drew Hanlon plan, for RJ about we're going to focus on this thing this summer and this thing the next summer and then so on and so forth. Like this is clearly a player and a trainer that are in lockstep in terms of what, they want to, how they want to go about RJ Barrett's career. And I'm very curious to read that firsthand. You mentioned the numbers. I hadn't thought about it was that much more in the paint because I'm just so used to like, well, it's RJ Barrett. Of course, most of his shots are going to be in the paint. But when you talk about taking charge of the team, part and parcel with that is like the days of me just waiting behind the arc for Julius Randle to do whatever the hell Julius Randle's going to do. And occasionally I'm going to get a kick out pass. I think that's what ended on December 31st. And not to say he doesn't still occasionally get that kick out when Julius does do that, but I don't know. Watching this team over the last 2.5 months, I'm not going to say that he's the number one and Randall's the number two because that's just that doesn't jive with the eye test either. But it seems like it's a 1A or a 1 and a 1A situation. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. And even on those kickouts, it's a lot more catch and goes, right? Mm-hmm. I think before it was more passive. All right, I'm going to get the ball and then I'm either catching and shooting or I'm going to wait and I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do. And then you kind of back out and you ISO. And I think you're seeing a lot more catch and goes from him. Randall kicks out or somebody quickly kicks out, somebody else kicks out and he just kind of catches and then kind of, even starts cutting right as he's about to catch the pass. You see that more. I think he's reading more. I think he uses his strength a lot better too.
Oh yeah.
Like I asked him recently if he thinks he's stronger now or he thinks he uses his strength better. And I was expecting him to say the latter, and he did. He said he thinks he's just using his strength better. Before, he wasn't necessarily bullying his way all the way to the rim. And he has a couple moves now that he's a little more comfortable with. He likes reaching under guys with his left when he's on his right. He likes that kind of stop 1-2 and then the little turnaround hook. Like he's got some moves that he's a little more comfortable with. I think he uses his strength well to get there. The thing for him next is like actually finishing once he's around the rim. Cause like you talk about how the efficiency is still not quite where you want to be. And you would think if a guy is taking 10, 11, 12 shots in the paint a game and he's taking 7 free throws a game, how could that guy still have below league average efficiency? Like RJ still does. And the answer is because even though bad finishing around the rim is still significantly more efficient than basically any other type of shot you can take. So it's good that you're taking those shots. His finishing around the rim is just still not necessarily there. He's shooting 50 some odd percent around the rim.
I think cleaning the glass has it for the year at 57%, which is in the 25th percentile for wings. So basically, 3/4 of the league, the players at his position are better than him.
Right. And that's the next step for him. That and the free throws, bringing him up from 70% and raising it up to like 80 or something like that. But those are the two things where it's like, okay, you want to bring up, because over this stretch where he's averaging like 24 a game in 29 games, which is great, his true shooting is still like 52%, which is below where you want it to be. It's below league average. And to bring that up, you want that finishing around the rim to be up in the 60s and you want that free throw percentage to at least be like league average for somebody at his position.
As a fan, my hope is that we look back on this as it's all part of some sort of progression, which is like year one. I've said this, I'll say it again. He was just bad. He was just not a good basketball player. Was throwing a lot of stuff against the wall. Occasionally some of it stick, but by and large, he was a kid who was learning how to play NBA basketball. Last year, I feel like he kind of morphed into this guy who was maybe for the first time of his career, truly a complementary piece to Julius Randle. And, you know, he would have all those spot ups. And that's what brought up his efficiency last year, is because he hit whatever he hit, 39% from deep. And like, he would still get his, I don't know how many possessions, like on ball possessions a game where he would drive and this and that. And like, sometimes it went okay and sometimes not. And now this is like, for the first time, I am running a basketball team, and we see what that looks like. So I think if with more experience of being in this sort of role, my hope is that the efficiency will come around the rim. The thing that I'm as curious about, if not more curious about, and it's what I would say is his number one thing that he needs to work on moving forward, is the playmaking. And I was just like, you know, you look at, you know, you do all these stat sorting and whatnot, and then you compare him against other guys with points and rebounds and whatnot. But then you look at other guards and wings and forwards in the league, and all the good ones, you know, they're up over 5 assists. They're up close to 6 assists. You know, I'm not even talking about Doncic or anything like that, but like just like regular old guys like Devin Booker, who had a reputation as a guy who never passed, right? For years and years. He's right below 5 assists per game. To me, that's where he's going to get to like his maximum output. I'll ask you this, and then we can move on. Maybe how do you view him? Or let me, maybe a better question. How do you think the Knicks view him? I know I'm asking you to project a little bit, but like, what would your best guess be?
Can I backtrack on one thing real quick?
Sure.
Because I think you make a very good point about this kind of all being part of his progression. And that's kind of something I want to.
Oh yeah, sure. Go for it.
I want to be able to theme in the story. I just want to read this Tibbs quote real quick. Cause I actually, normally he can be long-winded and evade your points, but I thought this was very well said from him. He said, "We all tend to measure guys where they are today, and we forget the steps that they take along the way to get to where they are. What we're seeing with RJ is steady improvement. You look to where he is today versus my 2 short years of being with him. I watched a lot of film from his rookie year," and then he didn't say anything about his film from his rookie year, but I think we can get the implication. He said he's made great strides, and I think he'll continue to make great strides because of who he is and how he approaches it. So I thought that was just really concise and well said from Tibbs, and I think pins the narrative very well that like he's 21 years old, and what you want to see from a 21-year-old is you don't necessarily need to see, all right, he's Luka, he's an all-star, and that's where you're at. You just want to see Luka's once a decade, right? Maybe not a guy getting better.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what you want to see. You want to see signs that he's getting better. And I think this is signs that he's getting better. I agree with you on the playmaking stuff. A lot of that plays off of his driving. Like, sure. I think a big step for him, I talked about his next step, just being able to actually finish on these drives, but it's also being able to kick out. Like Ben Ritholtz pointed out on Twitter the other day, a really good point. And RJ even talked about it after the game, that like there are times where he hits the paint and he's got a shooter wide open, and instead he's just kind of got tunnel vision of, I was supposed to go up here, so I'm going to go up. Yeah. And they say all the time, they all repeat that Tibbs line of the game will tell you what to do. The game will tell you what to do, but you can tell when they're predetermining and they are not letting the game tell them what to do, because it looks like that. It looks like I hit the paint. I got to the paint. There are 3 guys around me. I have Quickly wide open on the wing with 7 seconds left on the shot clock. And instead of passing to Quickly, I drove into the paint with the purpose of shooting. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm supposed to shoot here, as opposed to realizing, oh, Quickly's wide open, I'm hitting him. And that's the kind of stuff where like, he's 21 years old. I think it's reasonable to expect he might not get a lead at that because he's not seeing that right now, but I think it's reasonable to expect he'll get better at it because he's gotten better at other stuff.
Give me 5.5 assists a game. That, 5.5, 6 assists a game. Like, Butler had the year last year where I think he was close to like 8. Like that's why Jimmy Butler's a top 10 player. I think the nice thing about RJ, and we haven't talked about it a lot, we'll see moving forward, is because if the perimeter game starts to develop as well, and you get a little improvement of the finishing, little improvement of the playmaking, and then develop a mid-ranger, and all this stuff kind of goes up, to me, that's where you're talking about a guy who's like, okay, maybe he's not elite at anything other than getting to the rim. But when you talk about just getting to a certain level, which is why, again, I'm curious how this summer goes, because to me, to a certain extent, and I don't know how much flexibility they're even going to have, because someone has to want your players if you're going to trade them. Like, I feel like this summer may tell us a little bit about what they think of him in terms of what role he can play for them moving forward. If you can't tell, I'm trying to transition to Randall because I have opinions on Julius Randle and whether I want him on this team long term. I do, actually.
Do you? I'm sure longtime listeners of this podcast have absolutely no clue of that.
Can you blame me though for being? It's been really frustrating. I mean, you've watched all the plays that I have. I mean, I'm not going to ask you can you think of a more frustrating season from like a quote unquote best player on a team? But this has been rough, man. It's been rough.
Maybe Aaron Judge 2022.
Well said. I don't know. Like he's playing. So by the way, I wonder how much of Julius playing better isn't like, and he's taking more shots, like is in response to like, well, wait a minute, hold on. This is still my team. I just don't know what you do if you're the Knicks, because are you again, we talked about it last time. Like it's usually something off the court when it's a sustained slump. Like how do you as an organization have faith that this is a guy you can rely on as a major piece going forward? And I just don't know that you can.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. And I think that's a question that they have to answer. Look, the extension doesn't even kick in until next year.
No,
I think an optimist would look at his last month and a half and say he's been much better the last month and a half, but it's not like he's been back to last year's caliber of play. It's not like he's returned to that. He's just been much better than he was. Like at the beginning of the year, I believe he's not the jump shooter that he was at the beginning of the year when he was shooting like 29, 30% from mid-range. And lately he's shown that he's shooting much better than that. But is he a league average shooter from mid-range? Maybe not.
I looked it up today from
he's
16,
around 35%.
Yeah, 16 feet to the arc, which is where he really made a lot of his money last year. He's at 34% right now. So it's like, all right, it's better.
Right. And if he's going to take a lot of them, then like, I don't know what you're going to do. I mean, there are certain things about him that are concerning. The ball dominance is concerning when the jump shot is at that level. It's just really hard in 2022 to have a good offense if so much of your offense is being soaked up by inefficient play, which right now is just kind of what he is. Now he's been more efficient lately. He's getting to the line more. He's getting to the hoop more. He's shooting around the rim more. He's just kind of playing with a greater aggression than he was early in the year. But it's still a lot of jump shots. It's still a lot of long twos. And it's still a lot of 31% 3-point shooting, which is just not where you want your lead guy to be. So it's problematic. And I think they have to try to figure out, look, this is probably just who Julius Randle is on the whole.
I agree.
And so I think it's the Knicks' duty to figure out how they can use him better. Like, is he at all willing to be used as a screener and roller more often than he's been?
What evidence would we have that is the case? None. No, I'm serious. Like what? Like,
I love your energy.
I just get like this. You're getting at the core of what has frustrated me most about the season, because there was a world. I believe there was a world where the season could have gone a little bit differently if he was more willing to embrace exactly what because you just nailed it. That's why I reacted.
But can I say something? I think there are certain things that are lack of willingness for sure, and I think there are certain things that are based on habit, and I think it's really hard to string across those two things. Like, for example, he never throws lobs. He could have Mitchell Robinson wide open for a lob or Jericho Sims wide open for a lob, and he doesn't throw lobs. I don't know why. I've never asked him, actually, why don't you throw lobs? I've just...
Can you do that?
I should have asked.
Just why? Just no preface. Why don't you ever throw? What do you think?
See, the thing is, that's not a press conference question.
No, I know.
Press conference availabilities now, but like people talk about reporters making such a big deal about being in the locker rooms. That's why, because after the game, if I'm just like, why don't you throw lobs? After the Philly game, like 2 weeks ago, I said to him, like, Julius, I know this isn't a press conference question, was how I started my question to him. Okay. And I asked him, like, what are your guys' film sessions like? What do you do in film sessions? Can you take me through them? Because I just kind of want to be better informed as to the team process. And because it was like after a loss, which it often is, in a press conference, he took it as me being like, why are your film sessions so crappy that you're not following anything? Which wasn't my implication at all. It was just like, take me through like, what are you guys doing? How do you format them? How do you lay them out? There's certain times like that's where locker room access is nice. You walk up to a guy and you're like, hey man, can you teach me this? Like, can you tell me this? It's just a one-on-one conversation. So I'd love to ask him, why don't you throw lobs? And maybe there's a way to ask that, like post-practice, that kind of stuff.
I feel like maybe if he threw one in a game, like, hey, I noticed you threw a lob there. That's
right, but he doesn't. But he won't because he doesn't throw lobs. He doesn't throw lobs. So like,
anyway,
why does Julius Randle not throw lobs
or do any of the other things that he doesn't do?
My guess is there's just something about it that he's either not comfortable doing, or because of the way he reads the game, he doesn't read the lobs. He just doesn't. He doesn't see them as a possible thing. And to me, that's not Julius. I doubt it's because Julius Randle is just unwilling to throw a lob. That's a read the game thing. Yeah. It's a how his mind works thing. It's a habitual thing that he doesn't really do. And so I think with players, sometimes it's hard to separate what's habit versus what a guy is willing to do. Because I think we saw Randle be more of a willing passer last year than he's been this year, for example. And he's the same person playing for the same coach with a lot of the same players, but habitually he's been very different this year. And I don't know the answer. He hasn't been totally and completely willing to share his perspective on things this year too, which makes it more difficult to read. And so I don't know, but I think there are certain things that are personality and certain things that are just like, here's my decision, I'm sticking with it. And certain things that are just basketball IQ. And it's kind of hard to tell them without talking to the guy.
It really is. And you guys, not just you, but everybody on the beat, I think has done as good a job as possible, getting the information that you have in the limit. Like you say, you don't really have many chances to do this stuff. So, but it is limited. And, you know, it's like, I guess I continue to focus so much on him because to me, like the coach, like whatever's going to happen with coach is going to happen with coach. I'm not going to say it's not interesting to me, but like there'll be another coach after Tibbs and there'll be another coach after that. And there'll be another coach after that. Like it ultimately comes down to like, what's going on the court? Like, who do they want to be the face of the organization? How are they going to play? And that's why with at least RJ, like you know, even his inefficiency at the rim, I mean, I dare invoke the name, like those are a lot of Kobe assists. Like good things happen when he drives, even when he's not making those baskets, especially when you have guys like Mitchell Robinson and Jericho Sims there on your team. You know, with Julius, it's just that, you know, that's why I'm just curious to see what they do.
Yeah,
like you
for
said.
Sure. I mean, another thing with Julius is like, that's why like a month or two ago, I wrote a story about Julius. It's about a month ago, maybe. Julius just hasn't been going to the rim with the same aggression that he did last year. Or I should say, Julius, his jump shot hasn't been falling with the same accuracy that it was last year. And so you want to see him get to the rim more than he did last year. And I wrote a story about, well, he's actually getting to the rim a ton when there isn't a conventional center next to him on the floor. When he doesn't play next to Jericho Sims, doesn't play next to Mitchell Robinson, doesn't play next to Taj Gibson, doesn't play next to Nerlens Noel, more than 40% of his shots at the time I wrote that story were at the rim. Whereas when one of those guys is next to him, at least one of those guys, because they have played lineups with Mitchell Robinson and Taj Gibson and Julius Randle, which just melted my heart. I was so excited about that lineup. When he plays next to at least one of those guys, that cuts in half to like 21%. And to me, that could read, okay, well, if Julius Randle played with a stretch five, maybe he'd be going to the rim all the time, because 41, 42, 43% of your shots at the rim is ridiculously high number. I mean, that's like an excellent ratio. That's not good. It's not acceptable.
No, it's fantastic. It is. Yeah.
And so, you know, maybe it's just as simple as Mitchell Robinson hangs around the rim and he doesn't like seeing a help defender there, so he doesn't go. You know, I'm just saying there there are certain things you can do if you're going to hold on to Julius Randle because he's got 4 more years after this one, that you can make his life potentially easier from a roster building perspective, maybe from a coaching perspective, maybe some offensive redesign from both personnel and from strategy. One of the things that I could throw out there is you could get a stretch 5, which is maybe easier said than done, but there are a lot of guys who shoot threes these days. But I think it's more complex than just Julius Randle is who he is, and you just chalk it up as a loss and you're done. I think he can be better, and I think the Knicks can put him in better situations.
I hope so, because again, it has been frustrating. Let's finish with a couple of quick hitters. You led me right to something I wanted to ask you, which is that the Mitchell Robinson contract situation, I guess I'll call it a situation, I don't know if that's the right word, it's developing, right? Jericho Sims' emergence, as you wrote about today or on Monday, you had that great clip from the end of the net game in there about how he just covers a lot of ground. He's like you said, he's not something you usually get at the 58th pick. I think that may, influence their thinking, or at least I wonder if it influences their thinking. If you had to bet on it right now of the 3 choices, which is he just leaves, it's a sign and trade and he goes elsewhere, or they re-sign him to stay here. What are you putting your chip on? I would bet that he comes back. I wouldn't bet all my money on it, but okay. I'll say if I have $100 and I have to allot a certain amount of money to he stays, a certain amount of money to sign and trade, and a certain amount of money to he leaves for nothing, I'll put the plurality of my money on that he stays, but not the majority. It's very specific. I like that.
The fact that they didn't trade him was a good sign that they would like to keep him. The fact that, to my knowledge, they didn't come very close to trading him. It's not like, that I know of. I don't know of a deal that they had. I know they got calls about him, but I don't know of a deal they had on the table that they negotiated the crap out of, and they were just this close to pulling the trigger and they didn't do it. To my knowledge, unless there's a thing I don't know about, that didn't happen. So I don't think they progressed particularly far in Mitchell Robinson trade talks, which I think if they were, expecting him to go elsewhere,
if they had real doubts, then
they would have. And he's getting better. Yeah. He's playing, he said the other day, he's playing his best ball by far. And I agree with him. He's for sure getting better. I don't know, my personal bias, which the Knicks obviously disagree because they just gave money to Nerlens Noel, is that finishing centers who aren't playmakers, aren't 3-point shooters, and really don't do much after touching the ball other than dribble handoffs or dunks. They're just, it's really hard to justify paying them more than the mid-level exception, not because they can never be worth it, but because it's just an opportunity cost thing. You can get 80% of that guy for 20% of the price. Those sorts of guys get plucked up in the second round all the time. You can get a Jericho Sims, you can get a Nick Claxton, you can get a Daniel Gafford.
We're in the free agent market.
Exactly. You can sign JaVale McGee for
literally the name
exception.
About to come off,
right. How many teams just signed JaVale McGee to how many great championship caliber teams just signed JaVale McGee to a really cheap contract and always end up being thrilled about it? The Warriors multiple times, the Lakers, the Suns now, and everyone's like, wow, he's really outplaying this contract. And he doesn't get a bigger one because centers like that it's really hard to justify paying them.
Look at what Noel got last summer. The Knicks signed him to 1 year and what was it, $5 million, right?
$5 million, right? Yeah. That's the reasonable Noel contract. And so it's hard to justify $13 million for someone like Mitchell Robinson when you can have a Jericho Sims for the minimum, or you can have a JaVale McGee for the biannual, or you can have a Nerlens Noel for $5 million, So for me, that's why it's a little bit tougher, but it's also plausible. The Knicks are in a situation where it's just all right, they have Mitchell Robinson, or, they want to use their mid-level exception on somebody else. And now they got to bring back Mitch, and they figure kind of the same logic they did with Nerlens, which is this is a movable contract if they feel like they have to move on. Just for me, I feel like the fit next to Julius Randle is very clunky, and the fit next to RJ Barrett, as we're talking about him as a guy who wants to get to the rim a lot, I just feel like it's very clunky. And it's a major reason why, like, if you have a bunch of guys who are best inside the 3-point line, it's really, really hard to have proper spacing. Spacing is more than 3-point shooting. It's geography. It's where guys want to be on the court. And when you have Julius inside the 3, you have Mitch at the rim, and you have RJ inside the 3, like, that's just, it's a lot of bodies.
It is. And I'm curious what they do. I think with Mitch, the fact that you could argue he is, if not the best offensive rebounder in the league, he's in the conversation. Like, that's big. I think the rim protection is like, it is a notch above your like average, like, quote unquote, rim protecting, dive guy. But even so, the markup to that is not, $15 million a year. The markup is like, okay, do you give him the max that he could get right now, which is, 12 and change? Like, I think that I've always thought that's a fair-ish number. It's probably a little bit of an overpay, but I don't know. All it takes is one team, right?
I think it's fair. I mean, Robert Williams gets 4 for 48. I think Robert Williams has proven to be a better player than Mitch. Does more with the ball. He's actually a really good passer. People talk about him as just like rim diving center.
And that's such a big thing. The fact that they just like, we don't have to get into Mitch's faults. He is an imperfect player, but he's very good at things he's very good at. And I'm sure somebody will reward him for that.
Yeah. And he also, for as much as he says he wants to do more on Twitter, he's actually very good at not doing things that he's not good at. Like,
that's true.
Like, it's really funny because there are a lot of players who do things they're not good at all the time just because they either think they're good or they want to prove that they're good at it. And it's really funny that Mitch is constantly like Instagramming and tweeting about like how he can do more. But he is like, one of his really positive traits is that he's really good at just doing the things he's good at and nothing else. It's like, that's like a great thing. Having a guy who just knows what he's good at and just does that.
Dwight Howard never did that. Dwight Howard's a pain in the ass. He always wanted post-ups and this, that, and the other thing that was nonsense.
Totally. I mean, look, I think there's a pretty realistic chance he gets something in the realm of that extension, 4 for 50-ish, because like that's the Wendell Carter contract. That's the Robert Williams contract.
It's the going rate. Your old buddies in Washington, Daniel Gafford, 3 for 40, I think it was. So a little bit more money, but one fewer year. Last thing before I let you go, it's what I think all of Knicks Twitter really cares about right now, although they're kind of getting their wish by default. Do you think there will come a time where, like an Alec Burks gets shut down, maybe an Evan Fournier gets shut down, maybe even a Julius Randle gets shut down? And do you think that there's any chance that would happen before the Knicks are officially eliminated this season? Again, if you had to place your chip on that.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I'm looking up something right now because I'm just.
I'm very curious.
Alec Burks has my favorite Knicks statistic.
The stat of the year. Yes, his 2-point percentage.
Well, if he gets shut down, it's not just his 2-point percentage. It's his percentage on layups versus his percentage on threes. I have no idea if someone has ever shot worse on layups than he has on threes in NBA history. So I just like to pretend that Alec Burks is the first guy ever to do this. But
I think we should all pretend that.
He's shooting 38.6% on threes. And according to NBA.com, he's shooting 36.3% on layups. So he's had a solid 2 or 3 percentage points spread there all year. And if they shut him down, that just takes away time for him to become, in my mind, because who the hell knows if anyone's done this, the first player to shoot worse on layups than he has on threes in a season. It's unbelievable.
If you think about it, it is beyond the realm of anything that is reasonable, like you said.
Just hey, Alec Burks, you have one shot, open gym, no one's there. You have one shot for $1 billion, and Alec Burks goes 23 feet from the basket.
Yeah,
that is.
Well, it's like, guys, if you're playing golf and you go in the water, you may want to go like further away than the drop zone, because that you're like in between clubs or so. It's like something like that, maybe.
It's the equivalent of someone who chooses to shoot like a off the tee instead of shooting a 5-foot putt. But the reason he doesn't want to shoot the 5-foot putt is because he has to flail and pretend he got fouled on the 5-foot putt, because that's what Burks does every time, which is why he's shooting 36% on layups.
Do you know what? I looked it up today. He's played, I think it's 94 crunch time minutes this season. Do you want to guess what the team has been outscored by in those 94 minutes?
Oh boy. Probably a lot of points.
It's 98.
Oh my God.
In 94 minutes.
That's really bad. He has a good net rating on the season too.
In clutch minutes. So, 5 points or whatever within 5 points. Or within
his
5 minutes, 5 points.
His non-clutch time net rating must be obscene then, because they're like a pretty solid net positive when he's on the floor.
Yeah, his overall numbers are not bad. Like he was part of all those bench lineups earlier in the year that had like double-digit plus net ratings with like Rose and Quickly and like Obi. Like
the starting lineup with him, which gets so much crap, has played a lot of minutes and
it still has a positive net rating. Like they're still outscoring teams when they're on the floor. Going by the whole year, it's. Whatever. It's insane.
Alec Burks gets too much crap from Knicks fans. That's a take that I have. As if Alec Burks playing point guard is his fault.
You're talking to president of. I've defended Tibbs a lot this year. The thing that I will never forgive Tibbs for is he has made Knicks fans hate Alec Burks. Alec Burks is a good player. And like, you're never going to convince me otherwise. That dude is a good basketball player. When used in the right role, he's going to be good. He's going to help you. He's going to help you win games. And the fact that I don't say that's that to belittle him. I just say that's that to show it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. That's all.
Well, they're using him as a point guard, and he's not a point guard.
He's not a point guard.
the most reliable Alec Burks-ism is every time he gets pressed, pretty much, he goes left hand to right hand behind the back to try to break the press. And it's like the only move that he has to break a press. And it's not because Alec Burks has some unacceptable handle. And it's just because Alec Burks isn't a point guard. He's just not a point guard. And it's not his fault that he's doing it. I agree with you. He's a very good wing. He's a very good 7th man, 8th man. If he's your 7th man or 8th man, playing the wing, coming off the bench, playing good team defense, guarding okay on the ball, knocking down 38% of his threes, 39% of his threes like he is right now, and creating shots every once in a while, and like playing 16 minutes when he's not hot and 28 minutes when he is.
It's perfect.
That is an excellent role player. He's an excellent role player. And the contract is fine, by the way.
Yeah. I do not begrudge them of all the contracts they signed this summer. That's the one you can't blame them for.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Do I think they could shut someone down? I didn't even answer the question.
Oh, yeah. Do you think?
So excited about Alec Burks layups. Yeah, that's possible. That's possible. Sure. Anyone. I don't know who it would be, but yeah, I could see that being possible, because often a shutdown also is a front office decision over. I mean, it tends to be made in conjunction with the whole organization, but I would call that more of a front office roster sort of decision. I mean, they already shut down Kemba. So,
we don't have to talk about Derrick Rose, but nobody out there hold your breath waiting for Derrick Rose to make
they keep saying that Tibbs keeps saying that he wants him to come back, but
I'm sure he does.
He hasn't practiced yet.
Yeah.
He still hasn't practiced, and that he had that second surgery for the infection 19 days ago by the time this podcast comes out. So
yeah, if they're somehow, not saying that this will be the case, but if they are somehow 6 or 7 games out with 8 or 9 to play, and they're, Derrick Rose is ready to come back. Why?
I mean, look, also they're playing McBride. They're playing Quickly. They're playing Sims.
But the Rose
seems like Grimes is coming back real soon.
So when Grimes could come back and he could get time.
He should, and he will.
But the Rose thing is interesting, because theoretically, if Rose comes back, unless, again, that's why I'm curious about it, unless they shut down, Burks, or probably would have to be Burks, there go McBride's minutes. And at this point in the season, it's I know it's a small thing, and he hasn't looked particularly great or comfortable the last couple of games, but like he should be out there. He should be getting these minutes. Like, see what the kid has, you know? So that's the only reason I'm curious about.
Yeah. I mean, no Reddish too leaves a spot open.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, Grimes is going to play at least 20 minutes, no matter what. Like, Tibbs wants to play Grimes 20 plus minutes because he just gives them the best chance to win.
Yeah.
Like, he's just a good NBA player right now. Guards well, shoots 40 from 3. Like, that's just a good player. But yeah, I could see them shutting somebody down. Sure. They get to a point where they're 15 sub 500. Why the heck not?
Maybe to preserve Alec Burks' record, they will shut him down just in case. We don't want him
the starting lineup data finishes a net positive. It is weird that lineup is a net positive, right? Because every time I tweet it out, I always tweet it out the exact same way. And every time my mentions and my quote tweets and everything on social media is just fans being furious about that starting lineup.
I know.
It's a net positive.
I know.
I do feel like I'm kind of trolling fans at this point by just tweeting it out the exact same way every single game.
But I mean, look, this could lead to a whole another conversation about like why the decisions that have been made this year were made, and like, you know, where is the genesis of where it all went wrong and what could have been done to fix it, if anything, given the roster they have. But we'll save that conversation for perhaps a postseason postmortem. For right now, before I let you go, Fred Katz, can you let folks at home know where they can find you, and what you got coming up?
Yeah, you can read my stuff over on The Athletic New York. I got that RJ feature coming out Wednesday. You can check that out. Worked for a little while on that, so definitely give that a read if you can. You can follow me on Twitter at Fred Katz, on Instagram at Fred Katz NBA, or that's it. I got nothing else.
That's enough, though.
Read John's newsletter. Check out Knicks Film School
if you have time. Read Fred.